Hello everyone, welcome back to Jordan Talks Football. Aston Villa win the Europa League for their first trophy in 30 years and their first European trophy in I think 42 years. Watched the game with my dad last night and honestly Villa absolutely battered Freiburg. There was absolutely no question in my mind that they were going to lose this game anyway, but I thought maybe the occasion might have made it a bit more difficult than it turned out to be, but as it seems, it was very, very simple for Villa in the end, and after all the build-up, after battering Forest in the semi-final in the end, it turned out to be pretty routine for Aston Villa, which was quite interesting considering the fact that a lot of people thought that maybe this would be a bit more of a sticky game for them, considering that it has been, like I said, their first trophy in 30 years. But really, Aston Villa absolutely battered Freiburg in every sense of the word, controlled the game, dominated the game, basically limited them to about one chance that I could think of in the entire game as well. And really, Aston Villa were never going to lose this match, in my opinion. And obviously, once they actually started turning the screw a little bit and turning up the steam, then they did, in fact, beat Freiburg pretty comfortably in the end. Villa with their first trophy, like I said, in 30 years, and I think fully deserved, considering how well of a job Unai Emery has done since he's come in. He's basically transformed the club from a mid-table team at best into a team that's consistently in the top 6 or 7 and are constantly in these bigger competitions and going on the up, I think, as well, in terms of how well the club has been doing. Consistently finishing top 6, top 7 has been fantastic for Villa, and really in general they've been getting further and further in these competitions. Obviously last year in the semi-final of the Champions League, also against PSG, I thought was really, really interesting. But I said at the start of the season that I thought Villa should be winning the Europa League, considering how highly seeded they were in the competition, and also in general just how good their squad was going into that competition at the start of the year. I always felt like this would be something that Villa could target, because last year they obviously did really well in the Champions League but probably fell off a little bit in terms of quality and just getting it over the line in those final few matches. But in general, I think Villa have actually got a really, really good squad. They added some really clever players to the squad this season as well, I think, and they just had the depth, in my opinion, to keep going and get further into these competitions. The Europa League as well, although they do have some decent teams in it, I've always thought Villa from the start were going to be the best team in it, and it would just be a case of some of them grinding out the results and then just really starting to, grow into the competition as time went on. And I think Villa did that really. Obviously in the league phase at the start, they had a few losses that were a bit erroneous and weird, but in reality, I thought they were always going to qualify. They did that pretty comfortably, and then really every single team that they came up against, you never really felt like they were going to lose. The Forest game, when they've had the first leg away, was a little bit of a weird one, but sometimes that can happen where you get a little bit overwhelmed by the occasion. But obviously, when they came back to Villa Park, Aston Villa have always done really, really well in that sense. Playing at Villa Park, especially last season, I remember against PSG as well. They basically battered PSG at home, but unfortunately just couldn't get it over the line in terms of that fixture, in terms of the aggregate score that they had. But overall, Villa are very, very deserved winners of the Europa League, and I think this is probably going to be, in my opinion, something they can kick on from for next season, obviously in the Champions League again, through double qualification of being in the top 4 and also winning the Europa League. So obviously it looks like Bournemouth might be the next Champions League team to come in 6th place, which is absolutely wild to think, unless Brighton can win and Bournemouth lose the last game of the season, and then Brighton would be in the Champions League. But either way, that is absolutely ridiculous and fantastic for the Premier League as well, I think, and really just a glowing endorsement of how good the league is in general. We've also got Arsenal in the Champions League final and Crystal Palace in the Conference League final. So really, English teams all across the board competing in all these competitions. We'll keep getting that seeded place each year by the looks of things. It's pretty much locked down, I think, for a good while. Unless we really fall off the bandwagon in the next few years, I think it's pretty likely that we are going to keep seeing lots of English teams in European competitions, which is what you want to see. But I mean, imagine being a Bournemouth fan right now and being in the Champions League. The first time they've been in Europe for basically ever. They've never been in it before. And then to go from that to potentially being in the Champions League next season, at least the Europa League, is pretty insane. So they're probably all Aston Villa fans last night as well. But I think Villa, like I said, absolutely no chance that they were going to lose this game. They really did just completely dominate the game from start to finish, in my opinion. The first 30 minutes or so a bit cagey, as you would expect, because the occasion is obviously really, really big. A huge amount of build-up to it over the course of the season. But I really felt like Villa were in control. You could see Freiburg were nervous. They kept giving the ball away. They kept just playing the ball out of play. They couldn't string a few passes together, really, and they just looked like eventually they got overwrought by the occasion. Whereas I felt like Villa, even though initially they didn't have that many chances, they worked their way into the game really well. Obviously get a goal from a set piece, as they often do this season. from Austin McPhee, who's been really quite a revelation for them in terms of the amount of goals they've actually scored from set pieces, and the way that they defend set pieces has also been really solid this season. And then obviously a little bit of magic from Buendia before half-time kind of killed the game off for me. At 2-0 up, you're thinking in a final as well, it's going to be very difficult for Freiburg to come back, especially when they haven't really created any kind of chances that you would see at all. And then obviously when the third goal goes in at about, I think it was about 55 minutes in, you're probably thinking that's definitely game over at that point. At that point, Villa were just kind of cruising along. They were managing the game really well, keeping the ball for large parts. And when they were defending, Freiburg, basically, I can think of having maybe 1 or 2 shots that were half chances. And there was only one real dangerous moment where they managed to get in behind once on the left-hand side and cross the ball in and square the ball across. But really, again, never looked like scoring or even like they were in it for the entire time. And really probably, unfortunately for Freiburg, probably just a bit too much of an ask for them as a club in order to just go and win this. Probably overperformed maybe in the quarterfinals and semi-finals. And then going into this, it was probably just a task too far for them. But I did say before the game to my dad especially, who's a Villa fan, that I think you can't underestimate the physicality of playing against a Premier League team. Obviously, in the German league, they won 4-1 the other day, my dad said, against Leipzig. But obviously, their league is effectively done now. And also, the physicality of the German league, there's a lot less pressing, a lot less running. And I think they just couldn't cope with how oppressive Villa were in terms of the pressing. They couldn't put anything together really more than 2 or 3 passes before losing the ball. They couldn't even get any long balls to stick up the pitch either. So they were really limited to very, very few opportunities to actually create any kind of good football. And I think overall Villa were just too much for them. So there we go. Aston Villa, congratulations, you've got your trophy, and I think next season will probably be even better if I'm being completely honest. Unai Emery, obviously a fantastic manager, and being in the Champions League again, they're going to have that 100 million quid for being in the Champions League. They can probably get a bit more away from their thresholds for their wages, which I know have been a concern recently, and probably invest in a few more good players, build the squad out a little bit more. But I don't think anyone's going to be wanting to leave Aston Villa after this in terms of the players that are there. We've got a lot of good players at Villa that are growing and growing in stature, and really I can't see any of them leaving, to be honest, going into the Champions League again off the back of this. Obviously they've made history. They're all going to be remembered as legends at this point at Villa, and I think the Villa are probably going to kick on from this and do even better next season. We'll see what they can do. As always, guys, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Do the YouTube things. Let me know down below in the comments if you think Villa are going to win another trophy next season. They could well do something in the FA Cup or maybe even in the Champions League. Who knows? So let's see what happens, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.